Okay, we all know what we're here for. Mario Kart has tracks, we are ranking them, though there is some pretense. First off, this list is only encompassed of the normal tracks, aka not any of the many transition tracks. If you're still confused on the clarification, the tracks we are going over are the versions you play when you go to Versus Play, and play the first option on any of the tracks. Outside of that, the only other thing to talk about is the things I'll be using as a criteria when I'm ranking them. First is how fun it is to play, because let's be honest, that's really important. Second is how much cool tech you do, because if I don't see half of the lobby doing stuff like this, I don't want to play it. Lastly is how it looks, including details, because I'm shallow. Oh, I also got my sister and mother in on this too. When it comes to often they play, you can look at it like we have the ranking of me, someone who plays the series far too much, my sister who is pretty consistently a casual player, and my mother who is new to playing the franchise. So we've got actually 3 rankings for the price of 1. Last thing of note is, similar to the last time, this isn't going to be super heavily scripted. This is mostly just going to be bullet points that I touch on, and from there, it's going to be random. So, look forward to that. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's start with the worst. Number 29, and the worst track easily, is Desert Hills. And I would say where to begin, but that would imply this track is notable enough to have so many moving pieces to pull apart. And if you couldn't tell from this tiny little rant, this track is very, very bland. First off, I think we can all safely say throughout the entirety of this franchise that the desert stages have always been the ones that are really hard to stand out, and are usually the ones that most people just forget about. First off, we have the fact that in any of the past games, the desert tracks are the ones that are going to most heavily rely on powerful items like mushrooms and stuff, as you can cut a lot of the track around it, which could be seen as a bonus. But that definitely makes it, I think, a lot more strained compared to a lot of other tracks. And let's talk about this from a standpoint of not even comparing it to other desert tracks, but just all the tracks in this game. This is one of the tracks that was newly made around the mechanics of Mario Kart World, and it is so boring. Not only does it not really introduce or teach you about any of the mechanics that are new to this game in a way that seems to make sense, it's also just bland. It is a basic circle, and since it's desert, you can cut a lot of that circle down even more with mushrooms, so yeehaw. Front running is even worse. Second is that playing on it has basically nothing. There are like 1 or 2 spots you can maybe wall jump or wall grind, you can go into the water to the right of the finish line, but that's about it. There is not much here. The only other thing that kind of interacts with the track are the giant moai statues that begin to move on the track, but they are fixed where they're going to move to, so if you can memorize where they generally are at, you'll be able to avoid them very easily. So playing it is just a very bland experience. It's a basic circle, there's not much to it. And unfortunately, it doesn't get any better with small, cool details. The track is supposed to be, I guess, some sort of excavation site. You start on a little oasis, which, gee, none of the other desert tracks in the past have done that. And the cool thing would have been having this be a huge excavation site with cool findings and stuff, but it really isn't. There's just some wooden platforms that they've been using to actually excavate the site, but outside of that, there really is nothing here. The only cool detail is the hieroglyphs on the side that reference some of the past games, including Sticker Star of all things. Why, I don't know. Because that's like trying to bring up in the middle of your workday that earlier that day you destroyed the company toilet with a giant steamy pile. Why would you even bring it up? But this isn't a topic about Sticker Star, this is talking about Mario Kart World and this garbage track that was made just for it. So, congratulations Mario Kart World, you had a steamy pile with your name written all over it. I'm sure there are some people who are going to like this track, and that's fine, but I'm saying from my standpoint, there is nothing I really enjoy about this track. It's not offensively bad, but it's not good. 28, and as always, we gotta stir up some controversy here. So we have Wario Shipyard. Now I'm really going to get out of the way that this is a remake from a course in Mario Kart 7 that I actually quite enjoyed, but I think it doesn't really work well here in World for a few different reasons. So, first and foremost, I'm going to say there's a little bit bias here because whenever I play versus or online races, for some reason this track always gets picked, and I don't know why. Even from random, not like even people just picking it. I've had to play this track so many times, and that has not made me like it anymore. So first off, we're going to talk about the fact that I think this one is not nearly as good as it was in 7. First and foremost, I think a lot of people forget in 7 and in 8 you actually went under the water, and one of my biggest complaints with this game is that the water, like, skidding mechanics where you're driving on top of the water is very finicky. It feels like you're trying to actually drive on lubricant that is just everywhere. It eats your inputs, it is not fun. I do not like the water mechanics in this game, so a whole track that's based around it, all the tracks that have to do with a lot of water are generally going to be a little lower on this list. But this one, I just think they butchered it so bad from what it used to be. I like the old version so much more. I do like it still looks good, it's pretty. There's not much to see in terms of, like, details. Like, from, you know, my standpoint, I don't really think there's anything that I've noticed. It looks pretty cool, the soundtrack's fine, but playing on it's not very fun. The new tech isn't really incorporated in it anywhere. There's like 1 or 2 spots you can rail grind, but for the most part, and it's a big problem that the entire game has. Why would you ever want to go with these routes that are just way slower, right? Like, it's just, I don't know, man. I don't really have fun playing on it. It's not super difficult. It doesn't really make use of Mario Kart, like, World's main mechanics. It's just forgettable. I don't know, man. I'm sad that they butchered this one as bad as they did. We're just gonna move on before I burst into tears, if you couldn't tell from the sound of my voice. Speaking of ones they brought back and made worse, we're going next with Cocoa Mountain or Choco Mountain. I've heard someone say Choco Mountain once, and I'll never let them live it down. So, Cocoa Mountain is one that was originally in the N64, and all the tracks in the N64, let's be honest, were kind of, at best, like, okay. But most of them were Dookie, from Dookieville. They were not good. But that's just because limitations of the hardware, right? The port we got in the Mario Kart Deluxe, like, DLC, I think was okay. I think for Cocoa Mountain, it's probably the best you could really get, unless you redesign the track so much, right? And then they were like, you know what, we should bring it back again in World, but we can redesign it. And once again, I think they just made it worse. The biggest problem I have with Cocoa Mountain, or like the new version of it that we have here, is that once again, it really is just another example of a track that I just don't think makes sense to have be a, like, the way it's presented anyway in Mario Kart World. It doesn't make sense in terms of, like, mechanically. It doesn't mechanically make sense. My god, did you just hear me have a seizure there? That was funny. Anyway, going back to the topic at hand, for the most part, a lot of it's covered in this chocolate goo-like stuff that you'll sink in like quicksand unless you have an item. So you're sinking farther down into the depths, kind of like my mental state. And that's kind of great, right? I don't have a problem with that. The problem I have more so is just the fact that it's just kind of forgettable. There's, again, only like one spot that I think has any kind of cool tech to do, and again, it's slower, so why would you do it? It's just another really basic track that, unfortunately, I don't think has really gotten any better. I do like the addition of the charging chucks being, like, them themed, and it being like a monster truck rally is kind of cool, but I think they could have done more with that, you know? But granted, it's supposed to be a remake, so they didn't want to make it too different, right? But as you can see further on this list, some of the remakes or ports of past courses that they actually remade and changed in a big way are actually so much better, so, you know, and I guess that's up to pure chance, or it would seem pure chance from their standpoint, but Choco Mountain, another one that, again, isn't offensively bad, but it's never one I'm going to be happy to play or really even look forward to playing. To give you an example of how forgettable this next one is, despite it being another new one added to this game, like made just for this game, I had to legitimately look up the name of this one before I recorded this audio. I'm not kidding with you. We have Whistletop Summit. The trains have always been one that are, I think, in terms of the tracks, are one that a lot of the casual fans won't like, but I actually really like some of the past ones. The N64 Calamari Desert was never that great. I liked the version 8 a little bit more. But I actually really liked Super Bell Highway from Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Mario Kart 8 DLC. I really thought that was actually a really enjoyable track. So then they bring this new track in with a train, and you can grind on the rails and stuff. But it is just, once again, a very basic course. Granted, it is on the Mushroom Cup, so I guess it's supposed to be kind of basic, so it serves its purpose. But of course, then when you compare it to everything else, I think it's just another one that's kind of bland. It's pretty basic with how the track is laid out. At least I'll give it this, compared to the tracks up to this point, there are actually, it was designed, you could tell clearly around one of the new mechanics, that being the rail grinding system, and it's one that you can use to practice that mechanic, so from a game design standpoint, this one makes a lot more sense. One, to be in, like, simple and be in the Mushroom Cup, but then two, to be themed around, like, trains. And it looks visually pretty appealing. I like the area that you start with, you know, that looks like a little train station, and see the little, like, cargo spots where they would, hold trains and whatnot. But outside of that, like, the main actual thing that you'd see, like the giant, you know, summit that has like the train smoke chimneys or whatever on it, you really spend like 2 seconds in there, even though there's so much else up there in like free roam. And I'm just really surprised that there aren't, like, and again, we're only basing this off of the basic courses that you go around 3 times, right, and not like any of the transitions, but I'm really surprised they don't make better use out of all these different routes you can take in those transition ones, and it's just really weird to me. But that's a side tangent. I just think that Whistletop Summit is, again, okay. I really don't think it's, again, none of these are, like, the only one that could be potentially bad, I would say to someone's face is bad, would be the first one I mentioned, the desert one. Again, it's one that was designed clearly with a purpose, and that's fine. I think it serves that purpose fine, but just when you compare it to so many of the other elements and things like that, it's just one that is a lot more forgettable. At least this one has some fun technical stuff you can do on it, but outside of that, this is just another one that I, again, forgot to the point where I had to legitimately look up the name for it. Not a good sign. I'm curious how many of you watched my ranking on Mario Kart 8 Deluxe tracks video. First off, if you did, you're a real one. I really appreciate it, because that video was not that great. But two, was actually the fact that it seems like Cheep Cheeps have a really bad record, because I did not, and I still don't, like Cheep Cheep Beach from DS and an 8 Deluxe version. And in this game, I really do not like Cheep Cheep Falls, which was, again, another new one made specifically for this game. Once again, similar to Wario, we can talk about the fact that literally it being, like, Japanese themed is really cool. We'll get to that first. Well, start with the good stuff, right? Start with the good, get to the bad. I really like the Japanese theming. It looks really pretty. The music is nice. The beginning part of the track is pretty cool. It's fine enough. Then you get to the water, and that's where both my left and right butt cheek begin to clench together as they're trying to huddle, you know, for comfort. Because, again, the water mechanics are so abysmal. The turns are not very fun. They are very tight, and again, in the water, your inputs get eaten a lot, especially if you gain even a little bit of air. If you try to start a drift at the same time, you're just going to actually get messed up, and your drift gets eaten by the sea monster, aka Nintendo. And so you can't really do anything. The Cheep Cheeps are obviously going to be flopping around in the water, and you can hit those. There are a few different small cuts you can do in there, but none of them are that great. The best one is the one that allows you to cut one of the corners, you know, to be in the water, but you need a mushroom for that one. So one of the cuts allows you to completely avoid the water. It's a messy track. I like the idea of going down like the waterfall or whatever, right? It's just the water mechanics are not fun, so it's not intuitive. And the fact that over half the track is water-based is obviously going to bring this one down a lot for me. But again, it looks really cool. There's a lot of cool small details in this track. But again, when it comes to just like the basic 3 laps or whatever, this is one that I don't look forward to. It has some small tech, but honestly, it's just not really a fun track to me. Next, we have a classic from one of my favorite games, Mario Kart Wii, but unfortunately, in terms of a track, it just doesn't really hold up as well as it used to, and that is Moo Moo Meadows. It is another track that very much heavily relies on you having items to cut a lot of it out, but in terms of playing on it, it's still pretty fun. It's basic, there's not much to it, not much has changed over the years. It looks a lot more impressive now, I like a lot more of the details, but in terms of gameplay, basically nothing has changed. There's a few different spots you can rail grind. Outside of that, though, there is nothing new here to see. There's not much to say about it. It's Moo Moo Meadows, it's an okay track, but it is not that notable, so it's here basically at the middle of the pack. Next, we have a SNES remake course, that being Koopa Beach. Koopa Beach was always a track in the SNES version of Mario Kart that no one liked because it was not very fun to play, it was very basic, and it was a really weird idea for a track. So for them to bring it back, and for it to not be at the bottom of the list, you may be surprised, but that's because they actually did a pretty decent job with it. Despite it being obviously water-themed, it's not super heavily, despite it being a literal island and being surrounded by water. It is a very basic circle, instead you go around it 5 times instead of the typical 3, so it's a little bit longer, but again, it's a really short track to make up for that. You go in a circle. It is a very basic track, there is not much tech to it. The reason it's so high though is because even though it's pretty basic and doesn't have too much tech, it has enough to the point where I find it fun-ish to play, and it relies on items kind of like Bay Park does. It fills a very unique niche in the game, and it's one that I think it needs to be here, especially since we don't have Baby Park. My favorite thing about it, though, easily is the theming. It being like an island where a huge rave's going on, run by this Koopa Troopa, just is brilliant idea. I love it. I love everything about a Koopa just up here absolutely rocking the day away and it just turning into a course. I wish they would have leaned a little more into it, like having the crowd down here dancing, hitting the gritty and stuff. That would have been hilarious. Not actually hitting the gritty because that would have been really cringy, but you know what I mean. Just absolutely letting loose on the dance floor would have been hilarious. So I really like this course, despite it being an SNES one, so you gotta give it some credit. Despite being from such a basic game, this is a really cool remake of it. I feel like maybe outside of Wario Shipyard, this one's gonna be another one that a lot of people will probably disagree with me on, at least a lot, like heavily, to the point where I'm getting yelled at for it, which I don't care, but that's fine. And ironically enough, it's Wario's other track, that being Wario Stadium. I think I can speak for everyone when I say that Wario Stadium has always had a shaky road in terms of the history of this game. We've had some really okay ones, like the N64 one, that for some reason they keep bringing back, and that one I always thought was just okay. It wasn't anything super unique. Then we had the GameCube Double Dash version, which was way too long, and still pretty basic despite it being long, but at least it looked pretty visually interesting and was cool conceptually. Wario has never had the best idea for stadiums, and it's sad because then Waluigi comes in and absolutely just slaps behind with how good his is. Waluigi Stadium is such a good track. So for them to instead bring a Wario Stadium in that seems to be a bit of a homage to the old games, but definitely a new one overall, you definitely would think maybe this would be a good thing, this is his time to shine, and for me, this track is just okay. Once again, it's not bad by any means, it is fine to play, there's a lot of cool tech you can do, especially look at time trials, but again, in terms of like anything else outside of gameplay, this one's pretty basic, and even with gameplay, I feel like there's just something weird about this track. Out of all the tracks that I can articulate what I dislike and like about them, Wario Stadium I have the hardest time doing so. I like the fact that it looks like it's just an abandoned factory that Wario turned into an actual like motocross area, and that all the advertisements on here are Wario themed. That's very in character for him. But overall, it's a track that I can't really articulate why I like it or dislike it in the way I do. It's just one of those tracks that for some reason is not super interesting to me despite having some cool tech. So it's not bad, but it's one that for some reason for me just doesn't wet my whistle, if you know what I mean. You know, it was only now when I sit down and start recording this audio I realized just how brutal I was in terms of ranking some of these new tracks, because we have 3 in a row right here. We have another new track made specifically for this game. It is Drybone's Burnout. Now, for those of you, just like last time, who saw my Mario Kart 8 Deluxe video, you may know that my least favorite track of all time in that game was the Drybone's Desert, or whatever it was, Dry Bowser Desert. I don't freaking remember because it's such a garbage track. But so maybe, you know, there's some bias there. And this is definitely an improvement. So yeah, that's why it's obviously not like low on the list, or like the lowest. But just again, when it comes to playing on it, I think this is one of those tracks that isn't so much forgettable as it is just it's not super fun to play on. Of course, there's a lot of lava places, and that works similar to quicksand in this game for some reason. I don't know why, but that means you can cut over some of it, and that's kind of cool. I like the fact that, you know, it has like the Day of the Dead. I don't remember the actual like in there like the right way to say it, but I like the, you know, the theming. I like the music. It looks really pretty. But just playing on it, like, it's okay. I like the little, like, honestly, there are a lot of segments I think that are even just okay. I think at this point we're at the tracks that I'm okay with. They're just ones that I'm not, like, fond of to the point where I'm like, oh yeah, that's one of my favorite tracks, right? There's the cool part where you go up the spine and you can go on the walls, and there's some rails to grind on. There's a really fun cut to do right at the very end. You can go up on the second layer right at the finish line. There's a lot more going on with this track that makes it enjoyable, but it's one that is just like okay in my opinion. I don't even really have much of a reason as to why. It's just one of those tracks I think, again, maybe I got too much when I started playing this game, like in random play or whatever, so maybe I've had a little too much of it, but it's fun. It has some tech, nothing super crazy, but there's some fun stuff you can do in this track. It has its flaws, but it's a good one, I think. Don't worry, we're not striking out 3 new ones in a row, we're not that cruel. We actually have yet another remake of an old game from Mario Kart 7 again, Shy Guy Bazaar. I want to say this, I really like Shy Guy Bazaar a lot, especially in 7. It is a very fun track, and in here, it is also very fun. They added a lot of new tech to it. But one of my biggest complaints is, why did they think out of all the tracks to bring back, that from one of the games that had the smallest rosters possible in terms of 7, the fewest amount of players, had the tightest corridors, and it was built entirely around this new, like, that specific game style, why did they think that that was one of the first tracks they should bring back into a game where they're implementing 28 players? It is a chaotic track. The first part where you're in the bazaar is insane. Now, granted, a lot of people are going to be going for cool tech and stuff, but it is very condensed. Items are going to be flying everywhere. It's very chaotic. And then you get to the second half, and there's some cool tech to do, and there it opens up a little bit more, and then you have that gliding segment. There's not much to say about that actual track layout. I think it's a fine track. It's fun enough. The main things I like about it are the new tech implemented. There's a lot of cool areas you can go to and do different things, and some of them are faster, some of them aren't. Some of them just get away from the crowd, and it works a little bit better here because the Shy Guy Bazaar, obviously, as I said, is going to obviously be very much contested with chaos. So having these different routes that exist purely to get away from that makes sense, even if it's a little slower. Again, the biggest problem I have is just, why did they think of putting in the smallest track possible? Like, one of the tightest, like, corridor-based ones. It's just a really odd choice. I don't think it's a bad one, though, again. I enjoyed the remake that they brought in, and that you can actually go up into the palace now. It's pretty fun. I like it. It has a lot of cool details, as I said. There you can go up into the palace now, obviously. A lot of it's based off Daisy's palace from Super Mario Land 1, which is a really cool reference to a game that no one really thinks about, or that Daisy's even a princess of a desert area at all, because she kind of gets overshadowed. One of my favorite details, though, is actually the masks you'll see in some of the areas. It's like a reference to an enemy from Mario Bros. 2, or Super Mario Land 2, I think. This is the other mask, like a Sniffit mask, I think. And then one of them is, I think, Madame Grape from Princess Peach Showtime. And that was a really cool reference when I saw that, so it has a lot of cool details put into it, and so it's a good track. It's just one that, again, I don't think, in comparison to the greats, is, like, super high up there. And that's always the conflict with these rankings, right? Is there's going to be the ones that are good, but you have to rank them still, so you're like, well, I guess it's the middle of the road because it's good and it has a lot of cool things I can talk about it, but I just love other ones more. So Shy Guy Bazaar fans, sorry you're weeping tonight, because I know my opinion matters so much to you. I did say we weren't striking 3 out in a row, but that doesn't mean we're going to have any mercy in my cold stone blood heart. Next we have the Mystery Block Ruins. A very impressive looking one, purely from visual standpoint. A giant question block that you drive inside of and it looks like a temple is really cool. In terms of playing on it, it's kind of basic in terms of what you're going to get in online play or even in basic play. Granted, it has a lot of cool tech you can do, especially if you look at the time trials for this game. There's a lot of cool things you can do on this track. This track is very technical based, and I enjoy that. But in most casual play, a lot of the tricks you go for here aren't very safe to go for or ethical in that matter. While it has some of the coolest cuts, it is one of the least fun, in my opinion, to play casually on. It is fairly basic, it doesn't have anything super notable about it, and it comes to basic tricks like, you know, wall grinding and stuff. There's a few areas you can go to, but for the most part, again, you're not going to go for those because they're slower, and this one's not as small and compact as Shy Guy Bazaar to make up for that fact. It is one that I enjoy. It is definitely higher up than most on the technical standpoint with how much cool stuff you can do. But when it comes to visual secrets and playing out casually, it is one that is not amazing. So it kind of gets this even balance of being in the middle. Really good in one avenue and just mediocre in the other. And so it cancels each other out. It ends up just making a mediocre course for me in my mind when it comes to actually playing on it. I know it may seem brutal talking about this, and I've obviously joked about saying that I'm ranking all the new ones so low, but that's because there's just so many new tracks in this game, and that's actually a positive overall, but of course that means there's going to be a lot lower on this list. Next up is Dandelion Depths, and I'm going to say from a theming standpoint, I love the fact that this is based off the garden stage, Steam Gardens from Mario Odyssey. That is a very cool nod to it. The whole infrastructure and area as a whole is really cool. Outside of looking really pretty, though, this track is, again, another one that is just kind of okay. It's better than, obviously, the ones up to this point, because that's how lists work, but it's also one that I don't think is better than any of the ones that are coming after it. Again, this is how lists work. So I think that when it comes to actually playing on this track, though, there's some small cool stuff you can do. There's a few cool cuts. You can go on a few rails. The main area, obviously, that people are going to pay attention to is going to be the cave at the end. It looks really pretty, let's be honest. And for the water mechanics, this one's not nearly as bad because you're just going down, so you can afford to trick a lot more and you're not having to drift around. And so when it comes to water-related stages, this is one of the better ones, in my opinion. The problem is that, once again, it's just very basic, and all the cool tech that looks really cool and is fun to do is often slower and less efficient, so you're not going to be doing it. At the end of the day, really the best things you can do in this track is a cut near the end that you need a mushroom for, and a very few small amount of small adjustments you can make outside of that, though you're just going to be going straight and trying to cut corners as tight as possible, which is as basic as it gets. So it has its flaws, but it looks really pretty, and I like the references, so it's an okay track. Again, this is how lists work. Next up, I'm going to be giggling like a schoolgirl for one of my favorites visually, and that is Starview Park. Unfortunately, it still isn't as good as so many others, that's why it's a little lower, but it is one of my favorites purely from a design standpoint. Obviously, the fact that it's based off the Comet Observatory from Mario Galaxy gives it brownie points. The fact that Lumas are really the only crowd you'll be seeing around you at this time. I love the fact that it seems to be a giant, library, something that obviously we know Rosalina did and would have a library in the Comet Observatory and read to the Lumas. I like that there is a lot of love to that particular game here. It also looks very pretty and has a lot of cool things tied into it in terms of free roam. When it comes to playing on it, it is good, but I could be better, and that's what's sad about it. I do like the fact that it goes with something like Ice Ice Outpost with the dual path mechanics of the green and the yellow, and that you can make different cuts and cut different corners, and there's a few different rails. It's a pretty basic track, but it's one that I still enjoy. What really kills it for me and makes it go this low is, of course, the darn stretch where we have to implement water mechanics. I don't know who in Nintendo implemented the water mechanics, but they must have been really proud of themselves because they wanted to shove that water mechanic anywhere where the sun don't shine, and they shoved it in here real good. There's a huge tube at the end that you have to go on, and it is not very fun. It is okay, there are a few different boost circles you can go into. It's just not very fun. I mean, it shakes things up, so it's interesting, but again, as someone who does not like the water mechanics in this game, obviously that's going to hold it back from being super high on the list. I don't necessarily know that I want the water mechanics taken out in terms of this water spot could be really fun, if I like the water mechanics, that is. So when it comes to an actual track, it's just alright, but everything else about it I love. So this one mostly just suffers from gameplay issues rather than visual issues. Visual issues, this thing has none of them. I love how this thing looks, but again, we're here to also see how things play, and unfortunately, this one doesn't play in a way that I really enjoy more than just a few times in, I don't know, a month. I really don't want to play it more than like 5 times in a month. Next is the only other SNES related track in this game being Mario Circuit. Despite Mario Circuit being a very basic track, obviously, it's appeared in a lot of the games, I really like this one. Similar to Cuba Beach, it fills a very important niche of being one that encourages items to a degree that's smart, but not overpowered, though I think Mario Circuit's a little worse at that, but it makes up for that in the fact that Mario Circuit is meant to be basic. You may be complaining, thinking, well, I thought you did like basic tracks, and that's true, but keep in mind, 1, this is my list, so I don't care. But 2, keep in mind as well that I actually really like the fact that this Mario Circuit seems to be an amalgamation of basically all 3 from the original SNES, because if you didn't know, Mario for some reason had 3 circuits, because of course he did, he's Mario. But it's really interesting that they were able to combine all 3 in such a way, and it makes it for a more unique and fun track for me personally. So I enjoyed this version of Mario Circuit the most out of all of the remakes that we've had in the past. I think this is the best that it could be while keeping faith to the original. In terms of details, it's obviously a Mario Circuit. And again, I always give credit to these older ones and give them a little more leeway because they are older ones, right? I'm gonna hold them to a less of a degree than I would to the more modern ones. Obviously, Nintendo should be a lot better at making courses for World than they should be back for the SNES. So for them to port these ones, keep them faithful, yet to still remake them in a fun way, I think that they did pretty good with this one. Doesn't have too much tech, but I think that's fine in this case, and it has enough tech where it's still enjoyable. I want you to know I had been waiting a long time for this track to reappear, and I'm glad it did, but I'm still a little disappointed, and that is the Airship, DS Airship. I don't remember the full name. I think it's just called Airship, isn't it? Airship Fortress or something. Either way, it is a track that was in DS, and I really liked it in DS. I liked the theming, I liked how it looked. It was a lot of fun to play. DS was a lot slower of a game, though, and didn't have all this cool, unique tech. There's a lot of cool different tech you can do on this one, which definitely makes it, give it some bonus points, like the rail grinding you can do. And I like the design, I guess. If you couldn't tell, I have a hard time articulating my thoughts for this one too, but it's for a different reason. That's because, despite me really liking this track, I have a hard time saying that it's really down here because it's bad. It's just everything else above this one I enjoy so much more in different ways or in different avenues. I think this one's still really fun. The only complaint I have about it is similar to Shy Guy Bazaar. It feels like they should have made it maybe a little bit bigger for 24 players. I don't think they really built it around that idea too well. The inside of the ship is really cool. There's some small details like the blueprints for how the bullet bills are made and seeing them actually loaded into the cannon. It's pretty cool. I like the details. It's fun to play. I don't think it's bad. It just doesn't have enough here, I guess, to grab my attention. I don't know. I don't know why. Putting it here almost makes me age 5 years. It makes me really sad because I've been waiting for this one for such a long time to come back. The only thing I guess I could say as a negative is, let's be honest, no one really likes at the end of the tower you have to swerve around for 5 minutes. Why would we want to do this? It's just holding a drift or releasing a drift midway through and then getting into another one. It is not that fun. It is not that technical. I do not like the tower. Unfortunately though, something has to hold this place, so why not be the champion of my DS rooms itself? This was the thing, again, as I said, I'd been waiting for such a long time. Even though it has to hold such a low placement compared to so much else, I still like this track, so it's going to stay here, and it's going to be a badge of honor in my opinion. Next up is Mario Bros. Circuit. See, there's the Bros in there, so it makes it different. Obviously, it being the first track meant to be played in the game, and the Mushroom Cup and whatnot, means it's going to be pretty basic, but despite that, it's actually a really fun track. It has enough tech to keep even more professional or even consistent players interested when they get it, because there's a lot of cool stuff you can do, but it's also not so much to the point where even being a casual fan, you can't make up for it. There's a lot of cool different shortcuts, spots you can do some tricks on, and there's a lot of cool things you can do. Clearly, it was built around the new mechanics, and that's something I really appreciate. It's also really cool to see a Mario Circuit type style track be in the desert. It's something you really don't see. Almost all the times it's in like green lush areas. So to see one that goes for something completely different, it being in like this Radiator Springs looking area, which yes, this track very clearly is based off Cars. I mean, look at the entire track. It's even called Luigi's Tires and stuff. There's so many things pointing to this being a Cars 1 reference. But that aside, there's so much to love about this track despite it being pretty basic. It's one that I think, in terms of circuit-wise, is one of the best we've had in this series in a long time. I'm just going to rip the band-aid off now. Bowser's Castle for this game is not as amazing as it could have been. I think we all thought Bowser's Castle could have probably made our jaws drop and loop around our body a few times, like some weird form of a wedgie. But I think what most people are going to say is that Bowser's Castle is still good, and it is, but it is not nearly as good as I think we were hoping. Maybe we got our excitement too high for the King of Koopas. It is pretty basic in terms of tracks go. There's a little spot here, like in this building, that you can do some tricks off of, and you can go above it. There's some small stuff you can do, but it's a pretty basic track, which is really weird to say for a Bowser's Castle stage. The most insane part is when you actually go up in the sky and there's this weird Bowser funnel cloud of actual, like, smog and global warming bullcrap that Bowser is inevitably causing. But hey, at least it looks pretty intimidating. Obviously, it being a floating platform with some turns and stuff makes it a little more notable. But for a Bowser's Castle, this is one of the most forgettable ones in the series, in my opinion. The most noteworthy part is actually when you probably fly up to it, but let's be honest, it's not that noteworthy. Out of terms of Bowser's Castles, they could have done so much more, especially something like World that has such a diverse way of playing. So it's really sad to see that this one didn't do more. That being said, what it did do was pretty good, even if it could have been better. So it's still going to have a rightful spot as a higher middle-of-the-road track. They really were showing love to the DS tracks on this particular game, as we next have DK Pass, another DS one. And DK Pass in the DS was one of my least favorite tracks. I absolutely hated how it was designed and it looked super boring. Thankfully, they remedied a lot of that issues here in World. It looks so much better, there's so much more detail to look at and be in awe of, there's a lot more cool tech to do. It is just in general a straight up upgrade to the track. That being said, it does still have some of the fundamental flaws, like the track layout itself is still kind of basic in my opinion. And it is kind of in terms of design compared to some of the other ones that we have later on this list. But compared to the original, it is unrecognizable. It is so much better. Me personally, I still like the Wii version of DK's Snow Mountain a little bit better. I just like how that one's themed and plays a little bit more. But I can see why some people like this one, and I think the fact that they brought it back at all is a good thing. And this is a straight up upgrade, as I said, to the original version. I enjoy playing on it, and there's a lot of cool technical stuff you can do. But again, it isn't so overwhelming to the point where casual players can't get a good placement on it. It's a really fun track, and one that I do enjoy. Next, we have one of the weirdest additions, that being Acorn Heights. This is kind of like Maple Treeway was in Wii. It felt very out of place as it wasn't really a Mario reference, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a fun track, and the same goes for Acorn Heights. Acorn Heights is another tree-based one, kind of like Wild Woods or again Maple Treeway, but this one is also pretty good. I enjoy the fact that it went for something a little different. I like that you can go down this little alleyway with Jacob's Ladders or Lilies of the Valley for the real ones, which makes sense because you're in a valley, and there's all this big greenery and stuff, whatnot about. My only complaint is I feel like there actually could have been a little bit more with like wigglers and stuff in here, kind of like in the actual Maple Treeway. I think they could have implemented more wildlife enemies in this area. That being said, really the biggest complaint is this valley area is the main centerpiece of the track, as that's where you spend most of your time. You only spend a few seconds on the actual tree itself, which is fine, but that makes it so that way the main centerpiece is kind of underwhelming in concern, because you know there's just not much there to see. Overall, it's a pretty fun track, one that has some cool, unique tech to do, and it's where you start getting to the more intense tracks that are a little harder to perform even casually. But to make up for that, its tech isn't that high of a skill ceiling in my opinion. None of the stuff here is super hard to do, so it kind of is the middle of the road. Looks really pretty and it has some cool details put in. And I'm going to say this now because I've been mentioning it before, but I am taking free roam into some account here. Not nearly as much as the actual races themselves, but I use free roam to check out some of the details that you may miss during racing, and I do give it points for the details for some of the past tracks, and even for this one. This one has some cool stuff going on. But I feel like, me personally, I liked some of the older ideas they had with Wild Woods and whatnot, in terms of having like little villages and trees. But it's still a pretty fun track. An unexpected one, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Okay, kids, get your Take the L dance out, because we're going to Salty Speedway instead of Salty Springs. Get it? I'm hip with the kids. So Salty Speedway, despite it, or it's Speedway or Beach or whatever it's called, I actually don't know the full name, it's just called Salty. But I do know for a fact that despite it being a water-themed one, this is actually one of my favorite versions of it. This is because despite there being water in it, it is done in a lot better of a manner. The fact that, for example, it is themed around like an actual city that is built on the water like in real life is a really cool concept, and the fact that it does it in a pretty decent way. You can stay in the water, but it's not really all water. It's actually, in fact, pretty even. There's a lot of ground that you actually drive on and water. Not to mention the water itself only has 1 or 2 turns in it, and when it does have those turns, they're pretty easy to predict, and even though, again, the drift can be eaten because the water mechanics suck, the rapids are a lot less rapid, so it's a lot harder to make those mistakes, and for me, it's a lot more consistently fun to play on, including the water mechanics. There's cool tech and cool areas you can go to that I really enjoy. There's a lot of cool things you can do with this track that just make it really fun. I like the theming of it, and obviously the fact that it looks like a little town and city is pretty cool. It may not have as many small details plugged into it as some of the other ones, including higher up on this list, but it's a fun one that I actually quite enjoy when I get it, and so it's going to go here. Attention to all you 2 Mario Kart Tour fans, they actually brought a track from that game in here, that being Sky High Sunday. This is also one you may remember in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe as one of the DLC tracks. Sky High Sunday and Mario Kart Tour and Deluxe were ones that I thought were kind of forgettable. They were pretty basic, they were just a circle, they had a cool theming around ice cream and stuff, and there was some cool tech you could do, but they were pretty forgettable. Thankfully, they upgraded it a lot here in World. There's a lot more detail put into it, and there's new mechanics added to it. There's a lot of fun things you can do with it. I do think there are some areas that were better in 8, specifically when you get the gliding segment, and that being like a little cafe looking area, and I liked the fact that in that one you only could glide like through the sign and get an item block. I'm really confused why they took the item block out of there. I feel like they should have kept that and then still added the new segments, but whatever. It's still really fun. I like the new updated version of the going left or right with the pink, or I think it's green tracks. There's the center area and there's all these walls you can grind on. I think this is a great adaptation of an old track being brought into the new world of Mario Kart World and built around its mechanics. In terms of them designing it around the new game, but having to use an old game's obviously design for the track, I think this is one of the best they've done, especially in this list up till now. I think it's a lot better, and it's definitely a big improvement from what was seen in Tour and in 8 Deluxe. Another classic from my childhood, but one that I never really looked forward to coming back, but now I definitely am. And that is because it is one of the best upgrades to a past stage we've ever seen in the entire franchise, and that is Peach Beach. Peach Beach appeared first on Double Dash and was pretty okay. It was a basic circle and there was some cool theming around it, but there wasn't too much of note. It came back in Wii for some reason and was about the same, and then we haven't seen it since. It's gone MIA. Now it's returned and it is so much better. It is one of the, if not the best improved stage out of any of the old tracks. They kept the old area and old layout that you would go to, including going around the beach, the cataquacks, and they added more detail, making it look cool. Overall, it's pretty good, though they did make the shortcut even worse than it actually was, the one where you go over to the little island, because now you actually go in the water, and as I said, water's icky. But they improved in so many other ways that it definitely makes up for it. There's a whole new segment where you go up into this castle-looking building. It's like just a little town, city area, and it is so much fun. There's some good turns in there, some cool cuts you can do, really cool tech, and even though it launches you out into the icky water at the end, I'm actually fine to deal with it because there's only one real turn you have to make, and so the water mechanics are a little more tolerable there because you're not having to make constant drifts and turns. In terms of them actually making a straight-up improvement to a past track that is returning, I think they couldn't have done better than what they did with Peach Beach. They added a whole new area but didn't butcher what made the original track even somewhat noteworthy. I really do like this track quite a bit. The only reason it's lower than some of these other ones is because, again, these other ones are just so good or were improved in so many different ways or just more fun to play. Because this one is still fairly basic even with its new additions, but it is a lot better than it used to be. And it has some cool details in there, but again, not as much as some of the other tracks, so gotta give it points where it's due. But this one doesn't earn too many points in that aspect, but don't worry, it makes up for it in other avenues. If you want to count this one as a desert stage, you can, and that's fine because, my goodness, do the desert stages in past games need OW. That is Faraway Oasis is next. It is another pretty basic track on paper, but it's one that is really enjoyable and one of my favorites tech-wise, because it's simple enough to the point where pretty much anyone can pick it up and be good at it, but being really good at it does take skill, and I really enjoy that. Its theming is really cool, being around an oasis with a bunch of wild animals and wildlife, and it's like a toad animal life sanctuary. It's really cool. I like the tech the most, even though its visual representation isn't bad and the cool little details it has isn't bad either. Playing on it is pretty fun and it has cool details. It is basic, but that's really the only negative I can say about it, is that it's a pretty basic track. But that doesn't necessarily make it bad, just basic. Thankfully it stands out in enough ways to make it memorable despite it being a lot more basic in so many other avenues. It's one I really enjoy and one that I am always excited to get whenever I get it, so long as I don't get like 5 times in a row, because it's, again, just a really fun track. Another one of my childhood staples, come again, that being Dino Dino Jungle, originally from Double Dash. Similar to Peach Beach, this one had been MIA for quite a while, but my goodness, I know why. It's because just like all of us, it had that awkward teen phase that it didn't want anyone to see, but my goodness, did it grow up into a beautiful adult. What we have in Mario Kart World is a straight-up improvement in so many different ways. I love the new theming around it. Instead of just being a jungle, now you have an actual sense of Jurassic Park containment facility. I love how it looks. There's a lot of cool new tech you can do, again, despite some of it not being really that good. And just in general, this was a great pick for Mario Kart World. The way they upgraded it just makes a lot of sense. It has a lot of small cool details and it has a lot of cool things about it. The only thing I really don't like about it actually is this Triceratops here. Just because it takes so much of the road, even though it could be used for a ramp, I don't always want to take it, especially because being in the air in this game lowers your speed by so much. I just wish that they would be able to change where the dinosaurs were a little bit, but I really like this track, and it's definitely my favorite version of this track in any of the games. Not to mention it has a bunch of cool areas you can see in free roam, but as I said, that's only bonus points. That isn't really going to be going into its main ranking. Dino Down Jungle is easily one of my favorite tracks that they brought back in this game. Next up, we have one of the most basic tracks in terms of it being on Cup List, but it is one of my favorites, obviously, and that is Crown City. I think Crown City was obviously had a lot of time put into it. You could tell just by looking at free roam, it has the most mystery panels put into it, and it's easily the largest single area in the game. Crown City obviously is where they put a lot of time and effort, and I can understand why. It's a huge city, it looks really cool. Now, just for clarification again, this is going off the track's basic version, so we're not going to be talking about going on the bridge or anything like that. This is purely going to be based off of the 3-lap formula. I really like how spread out the track is, that there's so much to it, obviously, that gives it a lot of bonus points. It may be a little long, but I think in the case of this game and in this track, it makes sense because, again, a lot of the other tracks are actually pretty short. You go around so much of the city, and I really like just how much detail is put into it. It's one of the, if not the most detailed tracks in the entire game. There are posters that show off different tracks in the game or show off movies and brands that are in the universe of Mario Kart. There's a lot to see that I really enjoy. And if you're thinking I'm just over here Craigasming over nothing but pure looks because I am shallow, you'd be kind of right but kind of wrong because this actually has a lot of fun gameplay to it. It is basic, but it also is one that has enough tech there to keep you like me interested, including some really cool optimizations you can do that make you feel really good for being able to get them off in time. There's a lot of fun stuff to do here. It's basic enough that I think anyone can pick up and play on this one and have some fun with it, but I think it's also one that has enough depth to it to keep people like me coming back to it. It is just a solid track overall. Nothing really bad to say. I think I speak for the entire council of Mario Kart stands when I say that Toad Factory being back is the best blessing we've had in a long time in this franchise. Toad's Factory is a classic from Wii and was one of the titles of few tracks that have never been seen since its launch, but we finally see it again in World, and if they didn't, I think there actually would have been riots in the streets. It is here, and it is good. It is very similar to what it was in Wii, which is fine, because if it's not broke, don't fix it. But it has new tech put in, new areas you can go to, including new spots that you can avoid the actual hubbub of 24 players, and it has a lot of cool new mechanics. I like the fact that the shipyard-looking area with the conveyor belts and item blocks that go in the water, you can actually go in the water as well. It punishes you in a different way than in the old game, where if you just went into the water, you would have to wait for lack to. In this one, it's just because you're in the water, and as I said, the water mechanics suck. There's not much to say. My same opinions on Toad's Factory being good are the same things that apply here, except this one was built around Mario Kart World, and it did that pretty well. I really don't have much else to say about it. It is a great track. I'm glad to see it back. It may be considerably, again, basic to some, but I actually think that it's one of the better tracks in this game. Yeah, it's a giant square, but it has enough going on that it makes it kind of forgettable that it is a square. You forget that it's a square. It seems more like a normal just track that's chaotic. I'm gonna be honest, when I first got to this track, I was immediately blown away, and I almost forgot how to play the game because of how much I was enjoying just the visual Craigasm I had in front of my eyes. And that is Boo Cinema. Boo Cinema is one of the prettiest courses in the franchise, and for me is my personal favorite of the haunted house style tracks in any of the games, including the Luigi's Mansion one from DS. Even though I'm sad Luigi's Mansion didn't get its own little racetrack here, I am very, very happy with what they did implement. Instead of the stereotypical haunted house that we've seen in the past games, including 8, they gave us something completely different. It's a haunted movie theater. It is really cool, and as it should be. It sounds really cool. First off, let's talk about the fact that outside of the mansion itself, or the theater, you have this huge dock-looking area above a poison lake, and believe it or not, this is a reference to the haunted stages from SNES, the Boo courses, I believe they were called or whatever, and them all being here in this little small manor that's easily overlooked is really cool. Yes, it's also in Choco Mountain, but I really didn't want to bring it up because frick Choco Mountain. And in this case, it's a lot more interesting and it's a lot more noteworthy than in Choco Mountain, where you could easily overlook it. I think a big thing about this track is that it shows an homage to past games, but what it presents new is really fun too. In terms of a course, it is pretty cool. It has a lot of cool details, and playing on it's still pretty fun. Being able to actually enter the screen was such a cool effect the first time you saw it. Even though that area is admittedly pretty short, and I wish it was a little bit longer of the course, it's still really cool and a really fun track overall. It has so much detail, I really could gush about this one for so long. But as I said, this video is getting pretty long, so I'll try to hurry this up. It's designed really well. It has pretty cool tech, though not the best in the entire game. And it, again, looks gorgeous. It is the best looking track in this game by a mile. Rainbow Road. Rainbow Road returning in this game is great. I was really nervous that they actually wouldn't have one in this game because I was very confused how they'd go about implementing one into an open world racing game. Well, that's the answer. They didn't. It was specifically only its own track, and it only connects with, I believe, one other course, that being Peach Stadium. An interesting choice, but one I can understand because Rainbow Road is very complicated as a track. It is a very long track, in fact, maybe a little too long, but I'm fine with that because it's Rainbow Road, and I love it. Of course, it won't have too much detail going into it, but it has more than a lot of the other Rainbow Roads in the series. First off, I like the fact that when you're actually in it, you go to more areas than just a straight-up road that is Rainbow. Granted, that is a decent portion of it, but eventually you go to a whole looking spaceport looking thing. You go into a giant tunnel full of rainbow thwomps and electricity, and then at the end, a train full of all the other things and entities from other tracks in the game appear at the end to go with the person in first. They'll start driving alongside you in this giant train. And it's a cool callback to the N64 version of Rainbow Road. I really like this one. It is very long, has a lot of cool tech to it, and it's a Rainbow Road, so you can't really call it too basic. Though it is one of the easier ones in the series, but that's to be expected when you have to make a track that's designed for 24 people to be racing on at once. I think overall Rainbow Road is a great addition, and this is a great version and a great addition to the Rainbow Road roster of the past. Do I think it's maybe the best in the series? Absolutely not, because there's one segment that definitely takes it down. This one segment where they had to implement water. I understand that they probably wanted to implement a little bit of all features into this game, but why are there then no rails really here? Why did we have to bring the water in? The rails are so much better mechanic compared to the water. Why is it here? It's a pretty little area, I guess. I like how the water looks, and I like the bridge and whatnot, but the water mechanics are not fun to play on, so obviously that's going to take down its enjoyment for me. I'm going to stop the rant right there. You're welcome. I just saved your ears at least another 5 minutes of me complaining about the water mechanics in this game, but that's my biggest complaint with this track. Other than that, it's a really solid track, and since we're getting close to an hour being spent on this video, we're going to speed it up. The Mushroom Cup being home to number 1 on one of these ranked lists seems unheard of unless you're a casual fan. Well, call me Captain Casual because my goodness do I love this one. DK Spaceport is my favorite track in this game, new or otherwise. I think that's very controversial, and that's fine. It is from, as I said, Mushroom Cup, so it can be considered basic or easy in some ways. But I think that this is one of the best designed courses for this game, and in my opinion, the best designed one. I think that this one was designed, obviously it's new for the game, but I think it works around its mechanics the best. First off, we can go over the fact that yes, obviously, this is a reference to the original arcade Donkey Kong. It has the music and everything. Really cool reference. Obviously, that's going to give it some brownie points. That aside, it being based around a spaceport that DK of all characters owns was very unseen and something I wasn't expecting, but I actually really like it. In terms of details, there actually isn't really too much to see, which is the only real complaint I have with it, but there's still enough that makes it interesting, and obviously it being a reference to a past title is a big enough detail for me to give it brownie points. But playing on it is where the heart and soul of this little guy comes out. It being like you're actually playing the original Donkey Kong, going up the actual grates and stuff is really fun, but it does it in a very unique way. You have the first area where you have barrels that you can either jump over or you can go on the side rails to completely avoid. It's a really cool trade-off, as in the middle you can get coins, but it may be a little slower and a little riskier based on the barrels. On the sides it may be a little faster, but you're not getting any coins over there. It's a very interesting trade-off. Then you get to the next area after that, which has even more barrels, but this time they're coming from the side instead of straight at you. Once again, you can go on the sides, but you can't do it consistently because there are actual barrels in the way, but you can do some really cool tech around it as well. And in the middle, you can get coins and do some tricks off ramps. Then you get to the third area, and it is all ramps and it is rails. It is really fun, and it allows you to really get a sense for these mechanics in a really unique way. Then after that, we have probably the only spot in the entire game that really encourages you to use wall riding. Do you even remember that that was a mechanic in this game? Because I think a lot of people probably don't. Unless you're really trying to get good at some of the speedrunning stuff and getting really good at some of the very small, minute things you can do, wall riding is very much a small optimization that doesn't matter much in the grand scheme unless you're trying to actually get really, really good at these small optimizations. But this area is fun. You get to go hog wild on the walls, and it is very fun and very satisfying. Then lastly, you go on one last stretch where you have a giant DK robot throwing barrels at you, kind of like in the original game, and the music changes to that of Mario grabbing the hammer in the original Donkey Kong. And that's the end of the track. Once again, you have a few different small things, like you can go on the rails on the side, or you can avoid the barrels. Either way, it is very fun. I think that this one, as I said, is a lot more based on my personal preferences for this game, more than even some of the other lists I've done in this entire franchise. Me personally, I think this one was designed the best for Mario Kart World in terms of its mechanics, and visually speaking, it is one of the most unique ones in the franchise, in my opinion. It is a fun track that I enjoy a lot whenever I get it. It is really fun, and is one consistently that I enjoy playing to this day. So there you have it. Whether you wanted it or not, that is my personal thoughts on the Mario Kart World tracks in terms of ranking the baseline ones. Again, as always, this is all purely going to be based on opinion and what someone values in these tracks and what people enjoy. I'm very curious though to hear what you guys think about your personal list if you want to share them down below, or even on my thoughts if there's certain things you agree with or disagree with, or even some facts you want to point out about them. Whatever it may be, I'm always interested to hear what you guys have to say about this stuff, because when it comes to gaming knowledge, there's nothing I don't want to know. Unless it has to do with something like hot coffee from San Andreas, in which case, please keep that crap to yourself. It is not the Christmas season. I do not need that. As always, thank you so much for watching, and again, as always, thank you for your support. I hope to see you all in the next one.